Okay, finally we're going to be testing our mine endpoints along with our transaction and blockchain endpoint to make sure that everything works well together. So before we test, I just want to remind you that one good idea would be to take out the console log in your proof of work method if you still have this in here, because having this console log in here will just make your program work harder and it will take more time to calculate things. And we'll save that. Cool. So first of all, let's test this mine endpoint that we just built out in the last video. So in order to test this mine endpoint, let's first head over to our browser and let's get our blockchain. So we'll hit localhost 3000/blockchain. Cool. So this looks good. Right now we have our entire blockchain, and we have the chain right here, and it has one block in it, which is our Genesis block, this one right here. We also have no pending transactions. So now let's hit our mine endpoint. So we'll open a new tab, and we'll hit localhost 3000/mine. And this should mine and create a new block for us. Great. So we get our note returned that says a new block has been mined. We also get our new block back right here. And we can see all of the data that's on our block. We can see it has a hash, and it has the hash of the previous block, which is the Genesis block. And it also has one transaction in it. So you might be thinking, where did this transaction come from? We didn't create any transactions yet. But this transaction is actually the mining reward that we put into our endpoint right here. This is the 12.5 Bitcoin mining reward transaction. So that's why we have this one transaction inside of our block. Cool, so it looks like our mining endpoint worked well. We just created a new block. So in order to test and make sure that we did create this new block, we can head back over to our blockchain endpoint and refresh this, and we should now have two blocks in our chain. Let's see. Cool. So it looks like it worked. We now have two blocks in our chain. We have this block here and this block here. Two blocks. Cool. And I can close this down to make it look more symmetrical here. We have one block and our second block. And our second block has a transaction in it. And this is the mining reward. Perfect. Let's mine another block to test it again. So we'll head over here to our mine endpoint and refresh this. Cool. So we just mined another block. This is our third block. We can see that here. We get the timestamp. We get another transaction, which is the mining reward. And we have the rest of our data. Now let's head back to our blockchain endpoint and refresh this. Cool. So it looks like we have all three of our blocks here as well. We have one block here, index 1, index 2, index 3. This is the one that we just created, and it has our mining reward transaction in it. Cool. And one more thing that I want you to take a look at is that our previous block hash actually aligns with our previous block's hash. So if you take a close look at these, you'll notice that they're actually the same. This one ends in 12100. This is our previous block hash, and the hash on the previous block ends in 12100. Perfect. Cool. This is helping to secure our blockchain, which is good. Now let's create some transactions with our transaction endpoint. So we'll head over here to Postman, and we want to hit localhost 3000/transaction to create a new transaction. Remember, we want it to be a post request. We want to click this body tab, have the raw option selected, and be in JSON format over here. Now for the request body that we want to send in, I have some example data here that was left over from a previous video, And if you currently don't have any leftover data in your request body, feel free to take a moment now and just create an example transaction. It can have whatever data you want to have in it. For now, we'll make this 1,000 Bitcoin. We'll leave this sender address and this recipient address. These can just be whatever you want them to be. Cool. So now we want to post to our transaction endpoint. And in return, we should get the text, transaction will be added in block 4. So for us, this transaction should be added to block 4 because we already have 3 blocks in our chain. So let's try that and see if it works. Cool. So we got transaction will be added in block 4. Great. Let's make another example transaction. So I'm going to change this to 50 Bitcoin, and I'll add a couple of characters here to this address, change it a little bit here. Not that it really matters for right now. Cool. So when we send this request, we should get the same response. Transaction will be added in block 4 because we haven't mined a new block yet. Let's try it. Cool, that worked. So now let's head over and let's get our entire blockchain again. This time we should expect to get the same exact blockchain, except we should have 2 pending transactions. The 2 transactions that we just created. Let's refresh the page and see what we get. Cool. So we have our chain that has 1 block here, 2nd block here, 3rd block here. Cool. We also have 2 pending transactions, the 2 transactions that we just made. Perfect. Now, if we come over here and we mine another block, these 2 transactions should be added to that new block. Let's try it and see if it works. Cool. So we have a new block mined successfully, and this is our block here. It's got our data, and it also has 3 transactions. Perfect. It has the 2 transactions that we created in Postman, and it has our mining reward transaction right here. Awesome. Now let's go back to our blockchain, and when we refresh this and hit this endpoint again, these 2 pending transactions should be gone, and we should have a 4th block in here now. Let's try it. So we have 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, and our 4th block. Cool. So we have our 4th block, that's good. And our pending transactions are empty. That's good also. We should also have all 3 of our transactions in here. Yep, perfect. We've got our 2 transactions from Postman, and we've got our 1 mining reward transaction. Cool. Let's create a couple more transactions and mine another block to just make sure everything is working properly. So we'll head over to Postman again. And let's change this to 500, and we'll create another transaction that should be added in block 5 this time. Cool, that's good. Let's create another transaction with 30 Bitcoin, should be added to block 5 again. Good. And let's create another transaction with 200 Bitcoin, should be added to block 5. And let's create one more transaction with 30,000 Bitcoin. Should be added to block 5 again. Great. So now let's head over to our browser. And when we hit our blockchain endpoint this time, we should have 4 pending transactions. And it looks like we do. We have all 4 of the transactions that we just created. Perfect. Now let's mine a new block, and this time it should be block number 5 that will be mined. And when we mine it, it will have all 4 of these transactions in it, plus our mining reward transaction. Let's see if it works. Good, so we have block number 5 was just mined, and we have all 4 of the transactions we created, plus our mining reward. Perfect. And finally, if we refresh our blockchain endpoint again, all of our pending transactions should be cleared out, and we should have a 5th block in our chain. Let's try it. Okay. Cool. So this is our 5th block right here, and the transactions are right here. And great, it has all of our transactions in it that we expect to be in this block. And our pending transactions have been cleaned out. Perfect. It looks like our mining endpoint, our blockchain endpoint, and our transaction endpoint are all working really well together. Great. So this is pretty cool stuff. By building this whole API and blockchain out and really understanding how the code works, it becomes a lot easier to understand how blockchain technology actually works. And you realize that a lot of it isn't actually so complicated. Cool. So this is the end of this section of the course. And at this point, I would encourage you to just kind of mess around with what we have so far. Try mining a couple more blocks and fetching our blockchain and creating some new transactions and really get a good feel of how everything is working. By kind of just messing around and having fun with it, you'll gain a better understanding of how the blockchain actually works. And one thing that I want to point out to you while you're testing all of these endpoints and messing around with the code is that any time that you change the file and save it, our server is going to restart. And that means that the blockchain is going to be a new instance of the blockchain. So everything that you have done previous to this, like mine blocks or create transactions, will all be cleared out because it'll be a new instance of our blockchain. So since I just made a change and saved it, when I refresh this, it should be a brand new clean blockchain. Just like this. So I just wanted to mention that to you in case you were wondering why our blockchain appears to be new sometimes. It's because we've saved a file and the server has restarted. Great. That's it for this section. In the next section, we will be creating a network of nodes or a decentralized network to host our blockchain on, just like blockchains are hosted on in the real world. And it's going to be pretty awesome. I'll see you there.